You're listening to In the Balance, the Iowa Judicial Branch podcast. Welcome to In the Balance, a podcast dedicated to exploring Iowa's judicial branch. I'm your host, Abhash Shrestha. Today, we're talking about tools used to communicate with the judge and the other parties in the court case. If you haven't thought of it, the tools are court forms. And to talk about court forms, I have today's guest, Tim Eckley, Assistant Counsel to Chief Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court. Welcome to In the Balance, Tim.
Thank you.
So I have a lot of questions regarding court forms, but let's start with you. What work do you do regarding court forms?
So I work a lot with task forces or judicial branch committees that might be devising new court forms. I take questions or requests from the public or from lawyers or clerks of court who say, hey, we might need a form for this process or this kind of procedure. So I determine the need for the court forms. I might do some research, work with some others. I can design the form, provide content. And a lot of what I do involves updating existing forms that have been in use for some time. And they may need to be updated just to maybe fix something that's not clear, or maybe the law has changed and we need to update the substance of the form in that regard.
So you're responsible for all of the court forms for this Iowa Supreme Court?
Yes, I work with them all. Yeah, we have some help with a couple other staff attorneys who pitch in on these, but primarily, yeah.
Could you give me intent or the purpose of the court forms?
So court forms are primarily designed as a way to help people who do not have lawyers to be able to provide the court and the other parties in a legal dispute the relevant information regarding that dispute. It enables the court to make a more fair decision regarding the dispute because they're getting the correct information in front of them. It's a way to make sure that only the information that is needed, only the information that is relevant to the dispute is getting into the court file and in front of the judge. And it sort of helps, especially people without lawyers, to know what the process is going to be. If they see a set of court forms, they can see the different things that are going to happen in the case.
Okay. So where can we actually find the court forms, and are they free?
All of the court forms on the Iowa Judicial Branch website are free to use. It's very important that people realize that. And they are available on the Iowa Judicial Branch website, which is iowacourts.gov. And once you get onto the website, you click on the icon for the public. And then underneath that, there's a option for court forms. And you click on that, and that'll bring up the whole menu of different sets of court forms that we have that the court has approved and that people can use in the Iowa court system.
So who would benefit from using these court forms?
Well, they actually benefit just about everybody who's involved in a legal matter. And that primary benefit, of course, is for the people who do not have lawyers. I should clarify that lawyers can use the court forms if they don't have their own form. Sometimes they have to use the court forms. It depends on if there's a statutory requirement or a court rule that requires it. But they primarily benefit the people without lawyers. But they also benefit clerks of court and judges. And the way they do that is it lessens the amount of time that the clerk of court is standing at the counter responding to somebody who's struggling to get their legal dispute in front of the court, or they don't know where to go next or what to do next. So it kind of alleviates some of their burden. And it helps judges because they get, as I said before, they get the correct kind of information in front of them that is pertinent to or relevant to the decision or the legal problem that they need to resolve. And it helps lawyers too, and it helps people with lawyers, because self-represented litigants can take up a lot of the court's time. They can take up a lot of the court clerk's time, and that can cause legal disputes to last longer, to take longer to resolve. And the courts are very busy. And so if they're devoting a whole bunch of time to these matters, then the people with lawyers, sometimes they get knocked back in the priority. Their case doesn't happen as quickly as it should.
So when you say it the legal disputes get shortened up. So the submitting like approved court forms, if they are filled up correctly, do they help reduce delays or backlogs in the court schedule?
Yeah, because what could often happen is that somebody without a lawyer in particular could show up and just not have the information they need because they didn't know that the judge wanted to see this or that document or wanted to talk about this issue regarding their legal dispute. And if they follow the court forms, they're way more likely to have gotten the right stuff in front of the judge, the right information in front of the judge that is relevant to the case. It's sort of a guideline, sort of guardrails to the legal dispute. That's what court forms do.
Seems like this information are really important for people filing the forms. Is do it right.
Yep, it helps. Abhash, I kind of want to back up just a little bit on something.
Sure.
And that is some statistics that I thought it would be helpful to include regarding court forms. And just a snapshot. When we talk about divorce cases in Iowa courts, 70% of the divorce cases in Iowa have at least one person who is not represented by an attorney. And those people can use these court forms. And it also helps the attorney that represents the other party, because sometimes it's difficult for an attorney to deal with somebody who does not have an attorney because the rules kind of shift. There may be some ethical questions. So 70% of all civil cases in Iowa, 79% of them have at least one party who is not represented by an attorney. So the numbers are huge and they're just growing. This is not a new phenomenon, but as the decades go by, more and more people, either because they can't afford it or because they just don't want to hire a lawyer, are going self-represented. They don't have representation from a lawyer. And so that's why these court forms get more and more use over the years. Now, one more statistics on use in small claims cases. 98% of those have at least one party without a lawyer. Now, that kind of makes sense because small claims, lower dollar amount involved in the dispute. But the court forms are mandated by Iowa code. The court forms that the Iowa Supreme Court designs for small claims must be used by every party, whether they have a lawyer or not, in small claims court.
When we're talking about the statistics, I have one. In 2023, 7,422 interactive interviews generated 37,188 court forums. So what exactly is interactive interviews and court forums?
So an interactive interview, the best way to describe it that people may recognize is sort of the TurboTax version of our court forms. That is, you go online and you pull up the program and you answer a series of questions. And the program will populate the court form itself so that the person doesn't have to try to figure out how to do that. This project, the interactive court forums, they're kind of like guided interview forms. It began in 2019 in response to recommendations from the Iowa Access to Justice Commission and as part of the Iowa Judicial Branch effort to make access to justice challenges not quite so severe. And to help Iowans, address their legal needs if they can't afford a lawyer or don't have a lawyer. So an interactive court forum provides primarily unrepresented persons an online, user-friendly, guided question and answer approach that enhances their ability to accurately complete and submit the correct forms. Kind of like what I was getting at earlier. Court forums help get the right stuff, the right information.
And these are all available in our website?
These are all available on the website.
Free of cost?
They are free. And these, like the other forms I was talking about, these also help judges process cases more accurately and efficiently. And it also helps the clerks of court because they can refer people who come up to the counter and need help. Hey, go to the website. This is one of the subjects that's covered by an interactive interview, and you'll find it much easier to use. So they're all on the website. We have quite a few of our sets of court forums. For example, one covering divorce without kids. There's 27 some forms. We have an interactive interview for that. We have an interactive interview for small claims cases. We have one for domestic abuse and sexual abuse and elder abuse cases. We are working on right now one for divorces with children. and we're working on an expungement when you are trying to get your previous conviction off the records.
Gotcha. So when we think of interactive court forms, it's almost made it so that they will ask questions and generate forms to make it easier for people to make the form itself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm sorry. One thing to understand is, we work really hard to make these forms easy to understand. We try to get rid of legal jargon and legalese. We try to use plain English so that they're easy to understand. But a lot of court actions are just plain complicated. That's all there is. So like a divorce with kids is a very complicated legal action. And so the forms are quite long. And you got to be patient, but these interviews will help you get through them. And it's really quite easy the way the interviews are designed. There's a whole bunch of instructions in the interview. It'll provide definitions. If you don't understand a term, you can click on it and pop up an explanation and that kind of thing.
So making it easy for interactive forms, but are there guidelines or suggestions available in other types of court forms?
Yeah, so we do have many of our sets of forms, not all of them. And if you go to that website and you look under forum for the public and then court forms, you'll see a long list of subjects that are covered that we have court forms for. Many of those, like the divorce forms, have guides or manuals that you can print out or pull up on the internet to help you walk you through the forms. And then, of course, the interactive interviews, they have their own instructions within the interview.
Gotcha. So when we're searching for, there are probably thousands of forms in the website. How have they been categorized, and how can people find a specific form that they need?
Yeah, so you have to go to that court forms page on the website, and there you'll see a long list of subject matter. For example, it could be divorce, it could be small claims, it could be a name change, it could be conservatorship or guardianship. There's just a whole bunch of subject matters that we have court forms for.
Are the court forms only available for civil cases?
There are some forms for criminal matters, but those are most of the effort is done in the civil arena, because in criminal matters, if people can't afford a lawyer, they have a right to get one.
Okay.
And so very rarely are people unrepresented in criminal matters.
And when you're talking about representation by attorney, when should one get an attorney when thinking about the court forms? Are these as easy to fill up by any people, or when should one get actual lawyer?
So getting a lawyer is always the best option. If you have a legal dispute and you can afford it, it's not always feasible for people. There are many places in our forms where we'll have printed language that says, if you do not understand this form, you need to talk to a lawyer. You need to talk to an attorney. There are many places in the interactive interviews where if you answer a question a certain way, the program will say, this program is not for you. You need to talk to an attorney, and it'll end the interview. It's always good advice to recommend that people get an attorney. And so we it just depends on the situation, depends on how complex the legal dispute is. It depends on the person who's bringing it or responding to it. Maybe English isn't their best language. And so if maybe it's a really complicated immigration matter, we don't have forms for that. You've got to get a lawyer.
All of the forms are available in our website. And are the submission of those forms done in our website as well?
Yes. So the interactive interviews has instructions for how you file the forms. Our website does as well. Everything needs to be filed electronically. And so depending on how you fill the form out, you might have to print it off and scan it in and then file it electronically. But there are instructions on the website and within the forms themselves.
Awesome. These all information feel so much important because a lot of people get overwhelmed. I'm glad you have at least answered some really valuable information for our viewers. And lastly, I would like to ask, do you have any plans for any new forms in the future?
Well, we're still working on the interactive forms. It's a very time-consuming process to make those interviews, and there's a committee that does it. We're finishing up divorce with children. Next, we're going to do child custody matters for parents who are not married. We're going to do that set of forms in the interactive interview. And then we're going to move to guardianships and conservatorships. Now, those forms already exist on the website in the PDF fillable and savable format. We're still working on the interactive interview for those sets of forms. Periodically, as I mentioned earlier, we need to go back and look at a set of forms and make sure it's up to date with the current law. And we're always open to suggestions for new court forms that should be made. A lot of it depends on the changes in the law, whether or not we need to make new forms. Sometimes the legislature says the judicial branch shall make forms. So
thank you so much, Tim, for providing you valuable information for our listeners. And thank you for telling all about court forms. Thank you all for listening to our podcast. We'll be back next month with another educational topic. Until then, thank you for listening to In the Balance.